Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I'm Brad, here with Doug.
Hey.
The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga Collection came out this year. It's one of those things where I was kind of interested in it. I couldn't remember. You know those things where in your mind you're like, I remember these things, but I don't remember if I have that nostalgia for them where I want to invest in like remembering.
Did I see it on a
them or not.
Blockbuster shelf, or do I actually care about this thing?
Exactly. Did I rent this for a day? I couldn't remember. It was like Blockbuster, rented it for a day, or I owned this and played it a lot. And all of these games kind of blended together in my mind. It's like, okay, I vaguely remember having one on Game Boy. I vaguely remember playing Turtles in Time. We all played the arcade game every time we saw it, let's be honest. But I kind of had that weird thing of like, I don't know if I care enough about these games to buy this thing. And then, yay, Black Friday, it was on sale cheap, and I was like, all right, you got me. $20 is my price point. Sure, I'll check it out.
Are they fun? Yeah, well, interesting.
I like these.
I'm surprised you're like, just blanket, they're fun. Are they hit and miss as hell? Or
we can get to the list. We can get to the list. But what I will say is it's one of those things where it's like I've kind of found, because I went through and played the Castlevania collection recently, the Castlevania Advanced collection. Even a couple years ago, there was a Street Fighter collection, and just even with the Nintendo Switch Online stuff, I've found that like I have no love for original Nintendo games. Funny. I have none. I have no patience for it, and I have no care about it. So I jumped in. I was like, all right, I'm gonna play them in order. I think I made it 15 minutes into the first one on the original Nintendo system, which I believe was just called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was like, no, we're not doing it. No. And I think I made it 15 minutes into that one, and then I opened up the second one, which is just a port of the arcade game. Made it about 10 minutes. Nope. And I think I literally opened up the third one, pressed start, and was like, nah, this still feels the same, guys. Nope.
Oh no! Oh, that's gotta suck. It's funny. It's like I've done those collections where it's kind of like dwindling down. I was like, "There's 50 games here." I was like, "How many of these are actually good?"
But once you get to that Super Nintendo era, and this is what I found again with like the Castlevania one with the Street Fighter. Once I hit Super Nintendo level, I'm in. I love like the Super Nintendo ones are great. The arcade one still kind of fun to play through. Yeah, they're fun, and there's a lot here. They're very straightforward, very just simple beat 'em ups. It's not something that I'm a huge fan of. I mean, I've played Streets of Rage, all that stuff. Streets of Rage 4 is fantastic. Played River City Girls fairly recently. Like those types of things, like I'm not a huge fan of, but every now and then they hit the spot, and that's kind of what this felt like. Where it's just give me 5 or 6 hours of just some simple walk in that straight line and hit these 2 or 3 buttons, and they go ha ha ha, and I'm good. And that's kind of where I came out with this. Is it's fun for that, and I think the Super Nintendo ones are right in line with where I'm at. Like that is the level I need to beat 'em up to at least be at for me to be in.
I was actually wondering, because you just came off of Shredder's Revenge, which is like we're gonna do all this but way better. Good. So I was curious, like, was it just how was that transition going? Like, okay, this is not Shredder's Revenge. Shredder's Revenge kind of pretended to be one of these things, but it actually has like it's a million times better or whatever.
Yeah.
How is that transition?
Again, I think you can separate it enough to be like, okay, like I'm playing the old ones. I mean, I go back and play old games enough that
that's fair.
You know what you're getting into. You know that I'm not going to get nearly the amount of difference in character. I'm not going to get nearly the amount of variety. I'm not going to get nearly the pace. You kind of know what you're getting into when you're jumping in here. I guess just to highlight one, Turtles in Time, which I think is obviously the star. That's obviously the one that everybody in their mind is like, oh, Turtles in Time. That's the classic. Like, that's the big one. That's in here. And that one I think definitely holds up. I think you could see that as one being like, This feels like something that could have came out recently and nobody would have been too upset by it. Just with the feature set, the moveset, the feel of it. It's like, okay, that it doesn't feel dated, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Was that an arcade game or was that a Nintendo?
It was everything.
Oh, okay.
So that's the other thing with this. This has, I think, 19 games, and it's really like, okay, Turtles in Time, there's the Super Nintendo version. fantastic. That's the one that I played through. I played through that one first. There's the arcade version, which I played through about half of. I was like, okay, it's the same idea, just a little bit quicker move speed and quicker things going with that. And then it also is Hyperstone Heist, which is the Genesis one that came out about the same time, is obscenely close to that. So it's in here like 3 times, which clearly I think is the one that when I started playing, it's like, okay, this is what I remember these games being. So that's the one I think where it's like, okay, I have a little bit for that one. So that one's really good. It was actually really interesting, I think, seeing just the slight variations, because there's a big difference between the NES, the Super Nintendo version, and the arcade version, and then the Genesis one is this weird middle ground between them, which I'm sure there was some kind of weird like legal thing where it's like, no, you can't put Turtles in Time, but you can put 80% of it and call it a different name on the Genesis, and it very, very much feels like, okay. And I think I looked into it, and like all of those came out within like a 1.5-year span. Like the pace of these things is insane.
Oh, sure.
Like there's like 19 games that came out between like 89 and 98.
Yeah.
It's like a 10-year span that this thing covers, and it's like 19 games. And again, variations, but still. It's kind of crazy. But the Super Nintendo ones, again, I think are the ones that I really latched onto, that I played through the most. The Genesis one I'm kind of lumping in there too, because there's only one for that. And yeah, they're just simple, fun things. The other ones that are in there are the Game Boy ones, which I played through the full Game Boy, the first Game Boy one, and loved it. Which
I would love to go back and start playing more Game Boy games.
And this is the thing.
I really enjoyed those.
I realized like I cannot think of the last time I played just a straight up black and white Game Boy game. I can't think of the last time I played one. Yeah. And it just had this weird like feeling of like, oh man, this is so simple. It's so just here, but it's still like, it feels tight. It feels like everything's there. Everything moves right. Everything feels good, but it's just had this weird, like, I don't think anybody has really done just basic, simple Game Boy games anywhere. They're not on Nintendo Switch Online. They're not things that get re-released, remastered, anything like that. Like, they're just this weird thing that exists in this time that nobody has really bothered going back to. So actually getting the chance to play one was really, really interesting to me. And it kind of was just one of those really big trips where it's like, I remember Game Boy games, and it's like, it does not matter. Like, all Game Boy games were like more or less the same type of thing. You had your 2 buttons. It's just like, oh no, you're not Michelangelo, you're Luke Skywalker. Oh no, you're not Luke Skywalker, you're Batman. Oh no, you're not. And
it is kind of funny when you're mentioning that you haven't seen a Game Boy game in a long time. I feel like the Super Nintendo era is kind of this like black hole of like indie game. A lot like nostalgia gets pulled to, but like again, my nostalgia is more tied to like Game Boy and PS1. But like it's funny because like people will make like retro games that are kind of like SNES, like let's say Shovel Knight, but then a lot of kids play Shovel Knight, so like, oh, this is what old games are, is like Super Nintendo. It's like, well, actually, no, old games are a lot of different types of stuff. I'm sure there's somebody who's out there complaining there's no Amiga games, but I've never played Amiga, so no, that's cool. I would love to go back and play some Game Boy games for sure. That's gotta be interesting.
But that was the one that kind of struck me as like, I haven't played it in a while. I will say though, I think again, it's the time period, like these were so crunched together. It's a lot of the same stuff. Sure. Like, if you've played one of these, you kind of get the same thing. The movesets are nearly identical in almost all of these. Like, it's all kind of the same thing for each turtle. So many ninjas. Like, every game is just how many ninjas can you fight? Like, and it's a lot in every game. Again, you're going for a licensed product, so you're reusing the same, like, 6 or 7 main characters. So like the end boss of every one of these games is Shredder.
Is it like mechanically similar to? Because it's interesting when you said they have the same move sets. I was like, because they're all made by the same. A lot of them are made by Konami, I think, correct? And so it's like,
yep, yeah, it's all Konami owns Konami did the.
Are you seeing like kind of like a through line of like the games of like where they're kind of copying assets and everything?
Oh
and,
yeah,
music and all. Oh, that's actually really interesting. I didn't know they did that.
But I mean, and again, especially because it's like. And maybe it's not quite as much just because it's a lot of like, it's clearly Turtles in Time the arcade, Turtles in Time the Super Nintendo game, Hyperstone Heist clearly being another thing with that. So but it's like Bebop and Rocksteady and everyone. There's a couple variations, like Turtles in Time, you fight them on a pirate ship, and they're like in that time period. But lack of Turtles knowledge is going to shine through. Whichever one's the rhino-looking guy.
We can talk Power Rangers.
Bebop and Rocksteady. I don't remember which one it is, but anyway, his moveset is literally just run across the screen at you in every game almost. So it's like the bosses particularly are where that moveset is kind of reused and similar every time. I mean, it's a beat 'em up, so you've got punch, kick, jump, kick.
The thing actually I was really, really curious about this game though is because like was the collection aspect itself. I heard they did like a ton of archival stuff in this that's available. How's that?
Yeah. There's a whole section in the menu that you can go into, and there's scans of instruction manuals, there's box art, there's concept art, there's little things like that for every single one of these games that are super just super cool to see. I didn't spend a ton of time with it. It was just kind of one of those, oh, okay, that's cool, that's neat, okay, fantastic, great.
Oh, that's a bummer, because I was super curious about that. I was listening to an interview by the guy who did that, and he got to go to like the Konami vault, and the story I'd heard is like there's only 1 or 2 people who actually have access to the Konami vault, and then you call them, and then you tell them what folder you want them to scan. So the guy, so your client's like, hey, what do you guys have there? Because they weren't sure if it got destroyed, and like, well, we just have this box that says Turtles on it. He's like, scan everything. So there's apparently some like really cool stuff that like nobody's seen. So it's like development at that time. So I was curious like how that stuff is.
I mean, again, it's cool, it's interesting. I flipped through it, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's, again, my interest in this was not like, oh my gosh, like if it was, okay, we're going to do this for like early Final Fantasy, okay, we're going to do this for, you know what I mean? Like if it was more something like in my wheelhouse, I'm sure I would have dug a lot deeper into it, but it was a lot of just, oh, that's neat, that's cool. Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, cool. They have this. It was a lot more of that than it was like, oh my God, the way that the director mentioned this and the way that they go, I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit of that in there, but I didn't dive in deep enough to really find that stuff.
Sure. Okay. I was just curious because that's the part that I was interested in, especially with like the new Atari 50.
The Atari one I've heard is so cool.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It seems like these collections are becoming, they've already gotten very good at like emulating the old games or doing what they need to make those work really well and rewind features and all that stuff. And next step seems to like making them a collection, sort of collector's item of like history and all that other stuff. So I was just curious. This seems like one of the first steps towards that way.
Yeah, and I think like, again, having played the Castlevania one and the Street Fighter one fairly recently, those are both, this is head and shoulders above what those have. I mean, that's literally like, here's the box art that was on Super Nintendo.
Sure.
The front and the back. Okay, are you going to play the game now? Well, I wanted to know more. Here's a paragraph summary we wrote of what the game is.
Actually, oh God, it annoys me so much. It's just like, here is the character in the game. It's like, I know who the characters are. I don't need their, like, whatever.
Yeah. So it's definitely like, I mean, it's head and shoulders above that kind of stuff. But again, not being the hugest Turtles fan at this point, and again, just like, I don't even know how much I'm into these games. So I was kind of like, okay. Yeah, cool, interesting, and moving right along here.
Where's this Super Nintendo game? I barely remember.
Exactly. So, but again, it's fun if you have that weird nostalgia for early beat 'em ups. I think it's one of the better collections. It's really well done. The games are fun. I think if you have anything from like 89 to 99, any sense of like, I used to play video games, there's something here for you, be it arcade, Game Boy, Super Nintendo. You kind of get a good, like you said, that through line of like how games evolved in that 10 years, which I think is interesting. With here's where we started out on the Nintendo, here's where we were at the Super Nintendo Genesis by the end of this 10-year period, and you can see that really cool evolution with that weird Game Boy kind of chucked in the middle of like, yeah, but on your in your car on your way to on vacation, exactly, you got to experience it like this. So it's a good nostalgia trip if nothing else. But we are Workforce Gaming. You can follow us on Twitter at Workforce Gaming, subscribe to us wherever you're listening, and we will see you later.
Bye.